Alicia May is a high sensory coach, facilitator, and creative empath who's on the line with us here just now. How are you doing today?
I'm doing very well, Toby. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Now, what do each of those terms actually mean? The high sensory coach and creative empath?
They are separate things, but at the same time, they're also connected. So a high sensory coach is somebody who is born with the innate trait of high sensory intelligence, which scientifically has been known as sensory processing sensitivity, which is in anything between sort of 20 to 30% of the population. And people might think, wow, that's a lot of people. Right. But it's just one of those things that seems to be so rarely known. But if you were to Google it, there's tons of information on Google. So if I backtrack a bit, Elaine Aron was the founder, really, of the sensory processing sensitivity journey. So highly recommend anybody exploring with her. I did a lot of my high sensory coach training was done with Willow McIntosh, and he's sort of the original founder of the high sensory intelligence. What it means is there's obviously a spectrum. So you've got autism, you've got ADHD, you've got all these spectrums, and high sensory intelligence is another one. You've got the low end and you've got the high end. The high end is where I'm at, which makes me an empath. So it means I'm sort of more high sensory sensitive, basically. So being that, it means that I experience the world very differently to most people. So over the years, people like me, we get told, oh, you're so different. Oh, you're just weird. Oh, you're so sensitive. Stop being so sensitive. But what it is it's a gift. It's a natural ability that when you understand it, when you utilize it, when you nourish it, it's actually a superpower. So I don't like labels, but they are a great way of describing things. So a HSP is often somebody who has a default of people pleasing. So I would call myself a sort of recovering people pleaser. We're also very typically perfectionists. So from an employer's perspective, fantastic. They love perfectionists because we see the little details, we see the subtleties, we see the weaknesses and the strengths and how to make it bigger and better and things like that. However, it can be such a detriment to us individually because it prevents us from doing things. It stops us from just going for stuff because we're going, oh, it's not perfect. It's got to be perfect before we, let it out there.
Yeah.
So it also means that we experience life very intensely, very, very deeply. So we're often we come across very intense. We come across as if we're sort of deep thinkers, lost in our own world. The amount of times in school I'd be told, Alicia, stop daydreaming, stop looking out the window. And I'm like, oh, but I really like it, miss. Like, nice little world for me. So it also means that our senses are heightened. So, I was walking down the road earlier today and somebody sort of zoomed past me in a wheelchair buggy thing, and sort of the smell of them was really strong. Thankfully, it was a nice smell. But it means that our smells are very intense for us. Light can be really intense for us. Lack of light isn't good. So, I typically suffer with SAD in the winter. Our pain threshold, it can be high. Mine is personally, but it means that we're very sort of sensitive to pain. We're sensitive to temperatures. So if it's really, really cold, that's going to sort of stress me out. It's going to make me very grumpy, very tired. If it's too hot, that makes me sort of angry and flustered. So it's all these things. But basically, high sensory intelligence is that the senses of the body are heightened, but it's also that we're very acutely aware of this sort of intuitive nature in us. We sort of intuitively know what to say to people. We intuitively know how to behave around people. So being an empath, being so sensitive, it means that my mirror neurons are kind of, let's just say, hyper wired. So it means that I can be having a conversation with somebody and I'm picking up every little detail in somebody's face, but actually I can feel it in their body. If somebody, I was at the dentist this morning and this woman asked her a question and she sort of really gave gave me a look as if of panic and worry. And I almost wanted to say, it's okay, like, don't worry about it, you know. And so it sort of screams at me. So I'll often feel how other people are feeling. So I'll be able to kind of almost have a conversation with them, and I'll know how they're feeling. And it's a really sort of bizarre experience. But we're so unaware of this trait that as children and even as parents, we don't know that our kids have got it. We don't know how to deal with it. Our kids having a complete meltdown, or I remember having meltdowns as a kid. And it's just like, why is she having a complete meltdown? Yeah. And basically, it's like a sensory overload of the system, whether it's negative, whether it's positive. And this is the crazy phenomenon. It's like you can actually get positively overwhelmed being a HSP. So I could go to a gig, I'm taking in all the energy and all the vibes. It's absolutely explosive. But 3 hours later, I'm creamed. I'm like, I need a power nap. I need to just meditate for 20 minutes.
Yeah. And for a lot of people listening, they might be thinking, wow, a lot of that, she's just described me. If they can relate, does that mean that they are some kind of high sensory person, or does it not work like that?
Pretty much guaranteed to work like that, because like with any of these things, it is that just resonance in the body. It's resonance in the mind. It's resonance in the sort of, hang on a minute, that sounds like me. So it most likely will be them. Absolutely.
And you say that a lot of your effort is put into other people and picking up things about them. Do you pick up things about yourself too that maybe other people wouldn't, like, ooh, I'm feeling a bit down today, whereas maybe most people would think they're feeling normal?
Absolutely. So I don't want to talk too much about sort of the negatives, because there is always a positive. So we have a tendency to berate ourselves, to belittle ourselves. So if we're having a down day, to say a non-HSP, it's kind of an average day. Yeah. But for us, it could be the end of the world. Yeah. You know, it could be, and it's really intense. So I don't know the specific statistics, but very traditionally, I mean, I have experienced the feeling of being suicidal. Sadly, my late brother did take his own life when he was about 30, and he was a HSP empath as well. So he was highly sensitive. He was a YouTuber. He just wanted to express himself. But as a lot of people are aware of, the world is a really chaotic, noisy place, isn't it? And we're sort of, some people may or may not be aware that there is a slow change in people's sort of awarenesses of like, wow, this is too noisy, this is too loud. So it's really important so back to your original question of like, yeah, actually, how do I feel today? How do I feel in this moment? What do I need? And it's really important for HSPs and non-HSPs, whoever you are, it's okay to have a rubbish day. Yeah. It's okay to feel low. But because we tend to be perfectionists and we always want to be the best version of ourselves, we always want to show up for everybody, we then berate ourselves for having a low day, but actually they're to be embraced as okay, this is just a low energy day, which really, really quickly feeds me on to we're very commonly suffering from anxiety and depression, which obviously can lead to suicide. Quite often we're very tired. We might come across as if we're really fatigued all the time. We might even have adrenal burnout from traumas and just go, do mentality. So it really is a case of bringing it back to yourself, bringing it back to your body. And really listening to those needs. And it's things like, okay, this isn't working for me. Why isn't this working for me? I could keep going on and on and on. But one thing I really want to stress to people is, I believe it's up until the age of 5, children communicate with feelings, people's vibes. They just have their senses are really in tune. And sadly, the older they get, the strength of those just drops off and numbs down, and it's not great. So we need to start learning to sort of get out of our heads and back into our bodies. And it's like, how do I feel? Not what I think, how do I feel about something? So it's really important.
And you mentioned your brother was high sensory too. Is it genetic?
Not necessarily, as in it is genetic, but you can't can't guarantee, say a non-HSP and a non-HSP, you can't guarantee that they will or won't have a HSP child, if that makes any sense. I don't know the minutiae of that, the real nitty-gritty science behind that, but the information I've gathered over the years is it is so, like, say with my family as an example, my dad is actually a HSP empath who sadly went through a very traumatic childhood, resulted in adrenal burnout, ME, for about a decade in his sort of 30s. So that was sort of a delayed breakdown of his body and nervous system just needing to chill out. So whether the fact that my dad is a HSP, my mum is a sensitive person, but I'm not sure. I think she is a HSP, but she's nowhere near on the high end scale that I am. So it could well be that, okay, genetically it would make sense that both my brother and I, but having said that, I know a lot of HSPs, particularly empaths, where their parents aren't sensitive at all. Having said that as well, it could be that the parents don't know of their sensitivities.
Yeah. And you're at the top end of that spectrum. Where do most people lie? Who is the average HSP?
Yeah, sure. So you've got a scale of 20 to 30% of the human population, and this trait is found in over 100 species of animals as well.
Wow.
So on, say, the spectrum of HSP, I think empaths are we are quite small. We're sort of 30% of that scale. So it's a very small, so out of the, say, 30%, it could only be maybe 7% of us are really, really high. But quite often we come across as introverts. So, quite shy, not wanting to get out there. Me, on the other hand, I'm what's known as sort of an extroverted HSP, which I don't love because, for years I was trying to sort of diagnose myself because I was like, I am different. Like, life is crazy different for me. Like, I'm very emotional, so I couldn't understand it. And I thought, have I got ADHD because I get bored easily? Have I got autism? Looking into all these things. But I was like, no, I'm not these things. And eventually I found high sensory intelligence, but it's because I'm very passionate and because I'm very sort of animated in my sort of communication that people think, oh, you're an extrovert, you must get energy all the time. I'm like, whoa, that's a different story.
Yeah.
Not a normal extrovert.
There are some who would argue that in this day and age, we're putting too many labels on people like HSP and other things and conditions and whatever.
Yeah. And
it's just to make us feel special. None of this stuff exists as much as we think it does.
I know the labels thing is really, really difficult because in an ideal world, I would love humanity and humans to just be them.
Yeah.
So to just embrace every aspect of who they are, not shy away from their strengths and their weaknesses and just go, yeah, hi, I am Toby. I am me. I'm Alicia. I am me. Whereas, we go through life and it's almost like people put labels on kids, if you know what I mean. Like, kids are just kids. They're just being themselves. But it's the teacher that says, oh, you're so sensitive. Oh, you are this. Oh, so then the kids grow up and think, oh, I must be this. I must be that. So it's a huge topic that I could talk about for hours.
If you call someone something enough, eventually they will become that thing.
Exactly, absolutely. So labels aren't great. It's good to not identify to them so much, but they're great as vocabulary. It's great now that I can go to people with confidence and say, right, yeah, I've got something scientifically known as sensory processing sensitivity. So that means my insula, my amygdala, and my mirror neurons are hyperwired, and my nervous system is very, very active. So to people that don't experience life in the way I do, will be able to understand what's going on.
Well, where are we able to keep up to date with you and find out about everything you do?
Yes, so I'm at alicia-may.com. I'm also, you can find me Alicia May on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, Alicia May HSP, and I do have a Facebook page as well. So people can contact me at any of those platforms.
Brilliant. Well, many thanks for talking to us today. It's been great to have you on.
Thanks, Toby, and thanks for your time. You take care.